George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
Turns out the only red lines around Rafah were rivers of blood, murder and mayhem. In Rafah, the tent city of 1.6 million defenseless refugee people, multiply displaced over the last 7 months. And there's mass murder in the Jabalia refugee camp too. 72,582 people have already voted on our poll, and the show hasn't even started yet. A world record, I'm perfectly sure. Mass surrender of Ukrainian forces around Kharkov. Perhaps the officer class were too busy voting. On our poll, on X at least, they don't seem to realize there are 4 or 3 portals that they can vote on in these polls. Or maybe it was the Eurovision Song Circus. You know, that family viewing in the early Saturday evening of men with beards and thongs and basques and hold-ups. Only those and such as those will even know what hold-ups are. I do, because I ain't no prude, you see. This is the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
Welcome to the mother of all talk shows, the Global University of the Airwaves, the College of Knowledge. And a big and particular welcome to our audience on KPFK 90.7 FM across Los Angeles and Southern California. Boy, how I like saying that. They're joining us this week for the first time, and we hope it will be a regular feature, and indeed that the show will be rolled out even farther than Los Angeles and Southern California, right across the Pacifica network. We are asking in our poll, let me mention that up front because it's spectacular news, who is the greatest danger to world peace? Is it Biden, Netanyahu, or Putin? Well, it depends where you look. If you're looking on Telegram, t.me/George Galloway, Netanyahu wins it by a country mile, 86%, with only 6% for Biden and only 8% for Putin. If, on the other hand, you're you're voting on X, it's 13% for Biden, 44% for Netanyahu, and a whopping 43% for Putin. They're not very bright, these NAFO trolls. They thought the poll was only on Twitter, and not for the first time. If you're voting on the YouTube community poll, on the other hand, it was 40% for Biden, 55% for Netanyahu, and only 5% for President Putin on the YouTube stream. And if you're watching on the YouTube stream, then it was Biden 47%, Netanyahu 52%, and Putin only 1%. If you're watching on the YouTube stream, or on Facebook, or on Twitter, or any of the platforms that allow you to do so, please share the show with all of your friends and contacts. The only red lines, it turns out, around Rafah, you know, the red lines that were drawn by President Biden, that were drawn by the European Union, that were drawn by the British government, by the United States' Western allies, by the Arab countries, by Egypt, whose national sovereignty, of course, was umbilically connected to the issue of Rafah, because Rafah ends where Egypt begins. And the Philadelphia corridor, which separates Gaza from Egypt, is protected by the Camp David Accords, and indeed, therefore, is an international law all of its own that has been broken by the Israeli seizure of the Rafah gate. The better to open it and drive machine gun, herd, maybe even cattle truck the Palestinian refugees into the Sinai desert. It would be biblical, except it is hell on earth in Rafah. 1.6 million people, 600,000 of them child hostages. That's what they are. Next time you hear anyone talking to you about hostages, tell them there's 600,000 child hostages in Rafah. How are they hostages? Because they are enclosed from all sides, including the sea. Even if they wanted to walk into the sea and drown themselves, they'd be blown up first by the Israeli naval guns just offshore. 600,000 children, hostages, being massacred right now, this minute. Not last hour, this minute they are being massacred. And of course, the journalists have been occupationally cleansed from the scene, and so only the shakiest handheld cameras are now bringing us children with their entrails spilling out of their gashed, open stomachs. Children without heads, children without legs. The legs themselves, the heads themselves. Yes, we're still all seeing it, or at least those who have a heart, those who have a mind, as to what all this presages for the future of humanity. We are all still seeing it. But the sheep were all partying at Eurovision. And what a sight it was. What a spectacle of Western decadence it was. I'm glad I wasn't watching it with my small children. I'm glad I wasn't watching it with my 89-year-old mother. How would I have been able to explain why at 6 o'clock on a Saturday evening, men with beards and thongs and basques and hold-up stockings and thigh-high boots were swinging their dicks around on television, and that we were all supposed to be watching it? It was the spectacle of Western culture. That's what it was. That's how it was billed. That's how it's portrayed in the Western media. They have no idea, it appears, just exactly what it says about the West, that is our cultural landmark annually. And it's becoming even worse, because not only last year when they rigged it for Ukraine, they tried so hard to rig it for Israel this time. I didn't see the song, I didn't see the program. I knew what it would be like, and I followed it on social media. And I knew that there was a mass voting effort going on, rather like the one that's just happened on my X feed, where 34,348 people voted, and 43% of them voted to say that Putin was the biggest danger to world peace. I knew there was multiple voting going on at Eurovision, but I had no idea just quite how much. I'm reading boasts from people who say that they used 5 credit cards to vote 50, 100, 150 times for the Israeli entrant, and they still spectacularly failed. Malmo in Sweden, where it took place, 10% of the entire population of the city was outside demonstrating for Gaza, for the Palestinian children being slaughtered, whilst the high-heeled boot brigade were cavorting around on the stage. They came 5th, despite a worldwide clarion call from all these patriots, the British patriots, like Tommy Robinson were hammering on their keyboards, trying to get their Britain first goose steppers to vote not for Britain first, no, for Israel first. The America firsters, the Trumpers, they were beating the drums, trying to force the Israeli entry over the line. All these patriots, all these nationalists turn out to be not America first, not Britain first, but Israel first, leaving the rest of us gasping the question, why? What first attracted you, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Trump, Mr. Biden? What first attracted you to an apartheid state that has murdered and maimed well over 150,000 people in 7 months, in cold blood? Hostages they were, inmates in a concentration camp with nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, mercilessly massacred, mutilated, maimed, all the hospitals having been destroyed so that they could not be treated as their limbless children were carried into hospitals that no longer have any of the means necessary to treat the murdered, the massacred, the mutilated, the maimed. What first attracted you to Benjamin Netanyahu? All these friends of Israel in the American political system, in the British political system, all throughout the West, only the West. They're the only people supporting Netanyahu and his murder gang. Don't ever be confused that we are the world, even if somebody makes a charity single to that effect. We are 13% of the world, and a very big percentage of us are vehemently opposed to the arming, funding, proselytizing for, and diplomatic covering for the Netanyahu Ben Gvir murder gang in the Gaza Strip. So we're not 13%. Maybe we're 7% of the entire world's population, but because of our hegemony in international media, we are led to believe not only that we all stand with Israel, but that the whole world is us, which is very far from the truth. In Kharkov, there are mass surrenders going on this hour of Ukrainian forces laying down their weapons and surrendering to the advancing Russian forces. This is not a Putin talking point. This is a fact. Now, it's possible that this was a rogue regiment, that the hundreds who have surrendered were somehow infiltrated by the advance guard of the Putinist forces. That may be true. We'll see tomorrow and the day after that. But it happened. Mass surrender of hundreds of Ukrainian soldiers around Kharkov, an entirely Russian city, of course, founded by Russians, overwhelmingly lived in by Russians, and of course the very city in which the late and lamented Gonzalo Lira used to report to us, for us, on this very program from. It's about to fall. Now, it's possible that they were left leaderless, that their officers were all busy voting on our poll, at least on X. It's possible that their officers were all busy voting for Israel in the Eurovision Song Contest, reciprocating for the assistance they got from the Israeli bots last year in Liverpool. All of these things are possible. But one thing is certain, that in inverse proportion, the NAFO brigades and their journalistic clatterers in the Murdoch newspapers are substituting for the collapse of the Ukrainian war effort, having drafted young boys and old men, having drafted women, having drafted pregnant women, having received uncountable billions of your dollars, euros, and pounds. The front is collapsing. The war is rapidly coming to an end that they told us was simply inconceivable. Indeed, they've said over and over again that they might well have to go to World War III in order to preclude. Well, they better hurry up. You better get your World War III underway quickly, lads, or there won't be any Ukraine to fight it over, because the entire show is collapsing. Now, I'm one of those who denounced the beginning of the war against the people of Eastern Ukraine 10 years ago. That's right. That's when the war began. At least for those of us with two brain cells to rub together. At least for those of us who actually pay attention before the Sky News cameras turn up. Before Murdoch's media empire can pronounce the names of the places being massacred, I was one of those who denounced the Western, US, EU coup that overthrew the elected president of Ukraine, set fire to the Ukrainian parliament, held at gunpoint the elected Ukrainian members of parliament, ordered them on pain of death to sign the Russian language spoken by fully 1/3 of the whole population of Ukraine, including the later President Zelensky as his mother tongue, his native tongue. We said no good can come of this. And when we saw in the trade union house in Odessa the opponents of this coup d'etat in Kiev being roasted to death, burned to death, in an early scene reminiscent now of what we've been watching in Gaza, we knew that no good could come of this. We knew that 10 years ago, when the massacre of little children and women on their way to school, on their way to the shops, on their way to their work, on their way back home, these massacres that took place over 10 whole years in eastern Ukraine, the Russian-speaking populated areas of eastern Ukraine, no good could come of this. People like me said, if this continues, there's going to be a war. Let's implement the Minsk agreements guaranteed by Germany and France and adopted by the United Nations Security Council, giving it the power of international law. Let's implement the Minsk agreements so that war can be averted and civil slaughter come to an end. We knew that when the Minsk II agreements were, as have now been admitted by Angela Merkel and President Hollande, as he then was, that these accords, the Minsk agreements, were a bloody farce, deliberately signed in order to provide a breathing space for a military option to be put together in Kiev that could finish the job of extirpating the language, the culture, and if necessary, the people of fully 1/3 of the territory of Ukraine. Now the teenage scribblers in the Murdoch press don't want to know anything about this. They don't even understand anything about this. They couldn't pronounce Kupiansk, and they don't know where Kupiansk is. Moreover, they don't even care where Kupiansk is. They don't give a toss about Ukrainians. Even those with the yellow and blue emblems, vanishingly few now, in their bios. They don't know anything about Ukraine, even its recent history, never mind its longer history. For them, Ukraine has been an opportunity to bleed and, if possible, to break the Russian Federation. Well, as someone who has stood with Russia for 50 years of my life, with a bookshelf full of Russian classics, with a playlist full of the majesty of Russian classical music, with a seat in a box in the Bolshoi in Moscow at any opportunity to purchase a ticket. You will never, ever, ever make me hate Russia and love Germany, any more than you will ever persuade me to hate China and love Japan. Because, you see, for a man my age and class, born in the shadow of the Second World War, I am acutely aware that if it wasn't for Russia, I'd be speaking to you right now in German, and the jackboots would be coming up the stairs to pull me off the air and off to a concentration camp. I promise you, tonight is going to be the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned.
Many people today struggle with the common mainstream media consumer. These types of people are mindless zombies. Instead of living authentically, they feed off masking their true thoughts and feelings, doing nothing and criticizing those who actually do their research. These type of media consumer can be highly manipulative, so here are some golden standard clapbacks when they start with their propaganda. When they say you are too much for them, show them a mirror and tell them to look for less. Draw a diagram of where your business is and their business is, to visually show them they are in the wrong area. When they say, please watch this clip from this reputable BBC journalist, remind them that there are no longer any reputable BBC journalists, and to instead watch the mother of all talk shows for some real journalism. The next time you encounter a brainwashed zombie, hold your head high and know their obsession to eat your brain is masking their jealousy of your confidence, your freedom in self-expression, and most importantly, your authenticity. Keep listening to learn more on the mother of all talk shows.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Who is the greatest danger to world peace? Biden, Netanyahu, or Putin? You can vote on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my Twitter, my X, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. Coming up for 80,000 people have already voted, with a marked difference in results, depending on which platform you've been the platform you've been voting on. If you want to call the show, it's free, toll-free in the US and Canada. The number is +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in the UK and Ireland, 08081 965522, and the worldwide number is 44203 966 2625. It's the world's global university of the airwaves. Today, for the first time, including an audience from KPFK 90.7 FM right across Los Angeles and Southern California. Rania Khalek is a journalist extraordinaire, host of Dispatches on Breakthrough News, and a very popular guest of ours. Rania, welcome. The point I was making earlier was that it turned out the only red lines around Rafah were the rivers of blood. I'm right, haven't I?
Yeah, George, it's really horrific what we're witnessing. Over 1 million people sheltering in Rafah, told to go there for safety. Over 600,000 of them are children, and they've been subjected to bombings all this time, but just not as much as the rest of Gaza. And now Israel's unleashing its fury on Rafah. You've had this theatrical performance by the Biden administration saying, oh no, please don't go into Rafah. Oh no, please don't go into Rafah. Only to then make little threats that are mostly symbolic. I mean, we did see the Biden administration put on hold one weapons shipments, but the other weapons shipments are still going through. It's insane. It seems like no one can stop Israel. If ever there was a case to be made for humanitarian intervention, which I've never agreed with when it comes from the U.S., because the U.S. is always arguing for humanitarian intervention just to go in and steal resources and overthrow governments that it doesn't like. But in this case, it's needed. I mean, Israel needs to be stopped. This unfolding slaughter has been going on for 7 months, just relentless genocide. And you still have people, I mean, it's shocking, George. You still have people in mainstream media on whether it's the BBC or CNN or MSNBC or the New York Times going and defending this disgusting slaughter. At this point, it has been 7 months. We are 7 months into this. Either you are pro-genocide or you're against genocide. There's no in-between anymore. There's no conversation to be had anymore. There's no debate to be had anymore. And it's utterly frightening that the most powerful people in the world are showing us that they're happy to shred the bodies of tens of thousands of babies in Gaza for the sake of imperialism.
It is, and the excuse given, I've never accepted it myself, was that the death camps of the Holocaust, that the West didn't know what was happening in these death camps. Otherwise, they would have bombed them and destroyed them. They would have destroyed the railways that took the cattle trucks full of Jewish people to their slaughter. They claimed that they didn't know that, in fact, when the death camps were liberated by the Red Army overwhelmingly, that it all came as a big shock to them, even though the beast of Berlin, Hitler, had written it all down in advance. None of them can claim this now. No one can say, no one in the world can say they did not know what Israel was doing in the death camp of Gaza. That's a very, very dangerous, difficult position for all these journalists and politicians now to be in, isn't it?
It is. And, you know, just to reiterate what you're saying about World War II, the U.S. did know, and they were asked to bomb those railways, and they refused to. They couldn't be bothered to bomb the railways that were taking Jews to death camps to be slaughtered on an industrial scale. We also have to remember that the U.S. and UK leadership, before the Nazis started taking large parts of Europe, were very supportive of the Nazis because they saw them as the strongest bulwark against communism, which they always saw as the greater enemy. And also, let's not forget what the Nazis did in the Holocaust was actually taking many lessons from what European powers, from what the American government has always done to the global South. So it was, you know, kind of like inverted colonialism, or colonialism turned inward. But to bring it to today, absolutely, nobody can deny that they don't see what they can't say. They don't see what's happening in Gaza right now. It's being live streamed for everyone to see. The images of children, the images of families on the run, the starvation, the people in hospitals. I mean, now we have these mass graves, hundreds of people executed summarily by the Israelis at Al-Shifa and Nasser Hospital, including doctors and patients. I mean, the evidence is there. Gaza is one giant crime scene for genocide. And they all know exactly what's happening, and they're trying to deny it. And you know, George, there's nothing more disgusting to me than people who wrap themselves in one genocide, being the Holocaust, in order to justify another one in Gaza. It is so sick. And it's what we're seeing in the US right now, with not just, invoking the Holocaust to justify killing as many civilians as they want to in Gaza, but also using the idea of the threat, or, this issue of anti-Semitism to shut down these pro-Palestine protests across campuses. It's incredibly alarming, and I don't think we've ever experienced this. Unprecedented. I don't think we've ever seen another time in history that we can point to where one genocide and one form of bigotry was used to justify the wholesale slaughter of children in another part of the world.
I think we have not seen it, and we'll come back to it. Let me stay with the Philadelphia corridor for a moment, Rania. I made the point earlier, maybe minor one compared to the other breaches of international law, which are manifestly being live streamed right now. But it is part of the Camp David Accord that there will be no Israeli military presence on the Rafah border with Egypt. I think 1 kilometer or 5 kilometers even is the nearest the Israeli army has ever been allowed to go. Thus, the Camp David Accords have been broken. That is an international treaty, again guaranteed, this time by the United States and the UN Security Council. Egypt's sovereignty has been egregiously violated. Is anyone bothered about that, even in Cairo?
I mean, I think there's certainly people who are bothered, but there are people in power in these normalizing states that are more bothered because they worry about what it means internally for their own populations that might get very angry about Israel's behavior and what it could mean for them and their hold on power. These countries like Egypt and Jordan and the Gulf states that have normalized with Israel, they haven't normalized with Israel because their populations love Israel. Their populations despise Israel. They've normalized because they've been cajoled and bullied and bought off and bribed into doing it. And that's why Israel has these treaties with the Egyptians and the Jordanians. And, we're not going to see the leadership in these countries care so much or do much about it, because at the end of the day, they rely on the U.S. to keep their monarchies and their dictatorships in power. And as long as the U.S. can guarantee their power, they're all in. And until there becomes some sort of internal threat of perhaps revolutionary spirit among their own people, or where they can't control their own population anymore, you're not going to see a change. You're just going to see empty words, which is what we've seen from these countries since the beginning, even with the more forceful words we've heard from, for example, the Jordanian royal family. That doesn't mean anything when you are still actively trading with the Israelis, helping them with their so-called security, in other words, helping them, oppress Palestinians, and assisting them in the case of Jordan with blocking Iranian missiles that are headed towards Israel. And everyone in the region is angry about this. It's just, the U.S. has created a very successful system of control across the region to make sure that nobody can do anything about it. But I will also point out that in other countries, we do have people doing something about it. We have people in Lebanon. You have Hezbollah doing something about it. You have the Iraqi resistance doing something about it, and those in Syria as well. And you have the Yemenis doing something about it, as well as the Iranians. And so this is the situation we're in right now, where it's not the Middle East of 2003. It's the Middle East of 2024, where there actually is an axis of resistance that is able to put up a fight against Israel and against America. And that includes the brave Palestinians operating out of a death camp in Gaza every single day, fighting for their survival.
On that subject, Netanyahu, by any metric, has dismally failed in this operation. If the stated purposes of the operation were the true ones. So, for example, he said it was to free the hostages, even though the hostages could have been freed on day one with an all-for-all prisoner exchange, all hostages for all Palestinian hostages. But a very large number of those hostages must have now been killed by Israeli bombing. and the massacres currently taking place may very well end up also massacring the remaining survivors amongst those Israeli hostages. Number two, it was to destroy the Palestinian resistance in Gaza. But just this day, more than 50 Israeli soldiers have been medevaced, seriously wounded, inside Gaza, meaning that the resistance is still fighting, and still fighting with a great deal of success against the invading Israeli armies. And of course, if the stated purpose was to win more friends for Israel across the world, well, that's the most spectacular fail of all, isn't it?
Absolutely. Just a couple of things you said there. One about the hostages. I mean, Israel doesn't care about their hostages. The only hostages who've been killed have been killed by the Israelis, whether it's them using the Hannibal Directive to try to stop people from being taken as hostages, because they prefer to kill their own people than to allow them to be taken as hostages and used as leverage to release Palestinian hostages. But moreover, the Israelis killed their own hostages when they thought they were Palestinians fleeing. My outlet Breakthrough News did a tally of all of the ceasefire proposals that Hamas has agreed to. We counted 10 since October 7th, and many of them were immediately after October 7th. Hamas said, we will release these hostages in exchange for all of the Palestinian hostages that you are holding. Let's not forget there are 10,000 Palestinians being held by the Israelis hostage. They are prisoners. And Israel repeatedly said, no. There was that one brief period in November where there was a week-long pause where they said yes, and there was prisoner exchanges. But other than that, even now, the Israeli government is the problem. They're the ones who keep saying no to Hamas, saying, we will give you your hostages back in exchange for this in a ceasefire. So the problem is the Israelis. They don't want their hostages. They don't care about them. That's all a smokescreen. Destroying Hamas is a smokescreen. The Israelis aren't stupid. They know they can't destroy Hamas. 7 months into this genocide, they have yet to militarily defeat the Palestinian resistance groups, again, operating out of a death camp. They can't defeat resistance groups operating out of a death camp. If you can't defeat them in these horrifying circumstances, you're never going to be able to defeat them. And they know that. This is all about grabbing as much land as possible and getting rid of as much Palestinians as possible, which has always been Israel's reason for existing. And it shows you what an existential crisis Israel is in, because it has isolated itself around the world. And this is really the beginning of the end of the Zionist project, in the sense that it's not sustainable. It is not sustainable to continue to slaughter and genocide people when there's cameras everywhere. It's just not in the long run. The question then becomes, how many people are going to be killed in the process? Because Israel's not going to go down without a fight, and it's going to take a lot of people down with it. And it's the greatest threat to the security of the region for that reason.
Let's bring it back then finally to the United States. Biden's now damned if he does, damned if he doesn't. Having facilitated, more than facilitated, having collaborated with the massacre and maiming of tens of thousands of Palestinian women and children, he pays the political price for that. Now, with Trump trying to outdo him as Zion Don, he begins to feign discomfort at the level of the slaughter and the impudence of Netanyahu rejecting his so-called red lines. And he actually loses such support as he might have had from amongst the pro-Israel fanatics in the United States, most of whom, of course, are Christians. It never should be forgotten. His goose is cooked, isn't it? Biden is finished.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see how Biden survives this politically. Just if you look at what's taking place across the country, America calls itself a democracy, but really only a handful of states matter in the presidential election. And one of those states is Michigan. It has a huge Arab American population, many Palestinians, many Lebanese. And I'm not saying all of those people are going to sit this one out, but a lot of them are going to sit this one out, and they're not going to vote for Joe Biden. After you've slaughtered people's families and demonstrated how little you care about Arabs, how much you really just don't see them as human when you've completely allied yourself with the Israeli government that's calling them, human animals. People aren't going to vote for that. I know many members of my family, even some who aren't that political, find this behavior disgusting, and they can't vote for someone who's genocided people. He also has the problem of young people. I mean, look what he's done across the country. We have this massive uprising across campuses, across universities in America, where young people are saying they're sick of their tuition dollars being invested in a genocide, in Israel's military occupation, and moreover, in America's military industrial complex. And for having these encampments, these very peaceful encampments, with Palestinian flags and saying not in our name, not with our money, they were met across the country with riot police, tear gassing them, firing rubber bullets at them, beating them with batons, and arresting them. Over 2,500 students and others arrested across the country for protesting genocide and smeared as anti-Semites by the president himself. So young people, that's the worst way to try to inspire young people to come out and vote for you. So yeah, I think Biden is politically toast. And when he does lose the election, he's going to blame it on Arabs and young people for getting Trump elected. But it's his fault. He can't win that game. He can't win this game where on the one hand, he wants to be the hardcore Israel supporter who puts police on students and kills babies in Gaza, while on the other hand, trying to be soft when Trump is going to outdo him. His advisors are idiots, and they'll go down in history probably as the worst political consultants ever. But of course, they'll keep being hired and they'll keep making money because they never learn from their mistakes. It's 2016 all over again, but on steroids.
Rania Khalek, superstar, thanks for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. Let me take a quick break. Then it's your calls all the way to the hour. See you shortly. Stay tuned.
As the green smoke rose, their faces flashed out, pallid green, and faded again as it vanished. Then slowly the hissing passed into a humming, into a long, loud, droning noise. Suddenly, a humped shape rose out of the pit, and the ghost of a beam of light seemed to flicker out after it. Forthwith, flashes of actual flame, a bright glare leaping from one to another, sprang from the scattered group of men. It was as if some invisible jet impinged upon them and flashed into white flame. It was as if each man were suddenly and momentarily turned to fire.
Now you get that War of the Worlds talking book, I suppose you'd call it. It's out of copyright, in case the murder scribblers are reaching for their lawyers. It's me reading H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, along with my two of my films, The Killings of Tony Blair and Killing Kelly. You get it all free of charge, with all kinds of additional content, including from tomorrow morning the ability to chat live with me. I'll be on a long train journey and I'll be chatting to my Patreon followers on that. So please follow me, patreon.com/George Galloway. It will cost the equivalent of a cup of tea in an insalubrious cafe per week. Maybe you think I'm worth that. Let's go to New York, where Matthew is on line one. Matthew, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, George. Good to be on the show. You can hear me?
Yes, very well. Go ahead, sir.
Oh, excellent. I'm sure we all would love to speak to you for a week. But growing up in New York, you can imagine this is a bastion of Zionism and propaganda and whatnot. I've lived it my whole life. I've spoken about it, my whole life. There's so many differences in people on how they look at it and whatnot. But I wanted to remind everyone, if you could remind everyone, I know that we all have protests all around the world going, but Sunday, I believe June 2nd, you can confirm that with me. Every year they have the Israeli Independence Day parade here in the city, in Manhattan. It's the largest independence parade that they have. My wife and I attend it every year to protest. Being everyone's, been out protesting, I'm inviting everyone to come there because, George, to see the thousands and thousands, especially the young children, so brainwashed and spitting hate, just not even knowing what they're saying. Even their parents, because where we protest, we have the Hasidic rabbis and all with us, and they actually organize where we stand over by the Plaza Hotel and the Apple Store. And these mothers are showing their, excuse me, I hate to say the stuff of the law, their breasts at these men, and like I said, just foul, cursing, hate. And you're looking at all these thousands and thousands of kids spitting in your face, knowing many of them will be IDF soldiers. It's utterly heartbreaking. And then to see our politicians there leading the way. And one other thing I have to say is usually in front of each group, each yeshiva, they'll have like a black, like high school bands playing for them. And you try to tell these kids that you're playing for the biggest racists around, and it's just horrifying, as we all know. I just wanted to say
Black
to everyone,
people playing for the apartheid state. Matthew, June is too soon after the massacre of Rafah for anybody to be out on the street anywhere with a brass band celebrating Israeli independence. It would be far better if some decorum would draw some temporary, at least, pause to these celebrations. The State of Israel is currently on trial for genocide before the world's highest court. The International Criminal Court is preparing arrest warrants, we are told, for Israel's leaders. 150,000 minimum Palestinians have been murdered or maimed in just 7 months, the vast majority of them women and children. The murders are taking place right now, until now, and again tomorrow. By June, who knows what that number will be. The idea in the great city of New York that would be the right time to take to the streets to celebrate Israeli independence is a particularly foolish idea. Matthew, thank you from New York. Now, by the way, you get the essence of this show in a podcast. That is to say, shorn of all Orococo adornments that may be thought to be extraneous. I don't myself. I like the real deal, the whole thing. But if you are one of those who likes just the essence, then you need to get onto our podcast, which is charting now in Belgium, Sweden, Malaysia, Singapore, and the UAE for the first time this week. It'll be available to download from tomorrow morning, and you can get it by scanning the QR code on your screen now. Please do it. Hassan is on the line in Manchester. Let's go to him. Hassan, welcome to the show.
How are you doing?
Good stuff. What would you like to say?
I want to discuss, basically, I watched David Cameron today. I don't know what possessed me. I'm not somebody who follows him, but I just wanted to see what he had to say following the massacres that have taken place recently and the increasing isolation, like to the point of, nothing left really for anybody who supports Israel. And I was just shocked by the amount of lies he came out with. And you could see the level of discomfort he had within himself, that he was having to lie publicly on air and to humiliate himself and to indignify himself to the point that everyone is just looking at him and saying, "You are just a liar." Even Koonsberg was looking at him saying, "You're you know, her body language, you could tell was uncomfortable with what." Yeah. So the question is, why are they not interested in saving their own dignity, their own selves from this hell that they produce from themselves? They're living a hell. They're going about justifying the slaughter of children and doing it in a way which is so damaging to themselves, so humiliating to themselves. And at what point do they turn around and say, "Well, you know, I've gone too far now. I need to save myself. I need to do something to return some dignity to myself"? And this is it was just shocking. And I don't. Before I would have been angry, but I'm just looking at him and thinking, you are destroying your own soul here. You know. So I've just wondered, at what point will he realize, or what is the reason that they're willing to lie to this extent? You know, why? I just couldn't.
Perhaps there's a portrait like Dorian Gray. There's a portrait of David Cameron in his fresh, young pig farming days in the Foreign Office, and that one day it will show the David Cameron as he is now, having been the enabler of the slaughter of untold thousands of women and children. Maybe it's the Shakespearean question. Am I that steeped in blood so far that is it bloodier to go on or to go back? Maybe it's about the corruption of the Western political systems by the empire. Maybe it is only that they are slavish servants of the United States and its imperial project, and that Israel is an indispensable cornerstone of that project. Or maybe it's something we just can't fathom. You can understand it more for a minister in the British government, subservient as it is to the United States government. What you cannot fathom, Hassan, and I put this to you because you're in Manchester, what you cannot fathom is why the opposition in Parliament consists of me on this subject and nobody on the Labour front bench. Nobody, not one on the Labour front bench. You've got to ask yourself, Hassan, as does everybody in Manchester, the great cock of the north, the great metropolis, the greatest city in England, why are 7 of the Labour MPs in Manchester members of the Labour Friends of Israel? Out with them all, every last one of them. I say, if you agree with me, Hassan, you should join us. Maud Z14 says, thanks, Mr. Galloway. Peace, in my opinion, is also hindered by special interest group lobbying power, including AIPAC and the military-industrial complex. And Nicola Curtin says, how close do you think the UN is to getting rid of the US veto in the US UNSC? And do you think this war will go on for at least another year? Well, the UN is not close remotely to getting rid of the US veto, because the US would veto any proposal to get rid of their veto. So there will never be the removal of the US veto on the United Nations. I've said so many times, I think it's necessary for us to break from the United Nations, to establish a parallel United Nations based on a democratic basis that is truly the voice of the majority of the world. I think that seeking to reform the UN is intrinsically impossible because of the existence of that veto. Thanks for that message. Now, here's a call. Do this right away, right after the show, or tomorrow. Join my audience on my new show, Have It Out with Galloway. You can be on a screen, on a video screen, talking directly to me, along with people from all over the world, on Have It Out with Galloway. Be in my audience. You simply email haveitoutwithgalloway.com. Go there, email us, and you'll be on the show before you can say Jack Robinson. Well, at least in the time it'll take you to watch this 30-second promo. Watch this. I'm back, not just here in the scene of many crimes, but on your screen with a brand new weekly show called Have It Out with Galloway. There'll be a panel, there'll be experts, there'll be me, but there will also be you joining me as a studio audience online. Have a go. Why don't you, if you think you're hard enough? So the show airs on my YouTube channel on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. UK time. There it is there. Just go to www.haveitoutwithgalloway.com. There you can register to be a part of my studio audience. All the people that have phoned me over the last 350 editions or so of the mother of all talk shows, I'd really like to see you on my video wall rather than just hear you. Dennis is in New York. Let's hear from him. Welcome, Dennis. What would you like to say?
Hi, George. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yes, the whole world is listening. Go ahead.
Thank you for having me again. No one knows better than you the incomparable genius and creative ability of Low-Key and the power that his music has to inspire and unify support for the ending the genocide in Gaza. So I had a thought. There is a precedent for this, what I'm about to offer. I'm going to suggest that Low-Key and you sponsor an international song competition that would be based on a song that would be based on Palestinian nursery rhymes and folk music that would inspire artists from around the world to write a song that could then be arranged and performed by musicians around the world in a format that is well tried by an organization called Playing for Change. For years, they've been sponsoring these projects where they coordinate the performance of musical events live being performed simultaneously around the world and then broadcast on YouTube. There's a precedent also in that the great composer Dvorak wrote one of his most famous symphonies, the New World Symphony, which was in fact similar, and this is where I got the inspiration from. The New World Symphony was an elaboration on the rhythms and the melodies and the intricacies of Native American music and African American spirituals, and written into a grand classical symphony. And you need to listen to the analysis of it to understand the beauty and the power of it.
I understand it, and I'm cutting you short only because I have to hit very hard time marks now, because we're joined by our friends at KPFK 90.7 FM across Los Angeles and Southern California. Dennis, it's a terrific idea. Low-Key is a regular guest and watcher of the show. He may well be making some notes on your idea now. Speaking personally, I don't have the resources, the capacity to do it. I have so many other commitments, but it's a great idea that those who might be able to afford that time and resource might very well want to follow up your quite excellent idea. Coming up, we've got Kym Staton, director of Free the Truth, FreeAssange. It was his film, TheTrustFall, that packed them in across this country, at least in the last week, fighting for the freedom of Julian Assange, whose fate, at least in the interim, will be delivered in the court in London, in the Strand, this very next day. I'll be right back with the second half of the show. You don't get to call me far right. You don't get to call me that on my own show. A lifelong socialist, the leader of a socialist party, the Workers' Party of Britain, with an Indonesian wife, with 5 mixed-race children, with a record of fighting racism all of my life, representing more people of colour in the British Parliament than anyone in history by a country mile. You don't get to call me far right. These kind of idiotic insults tossed around by infantile leftists who think that anyone to the right of them is a fascist, is a racist. They are the cause of the crashing and burning of what used to be called the left. They are the cause of it. They have discredited leftism with their foolish, idiotic isms and ists and smears that emanate from them like a bad smell.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Welcome back to the mother of all talk shows, the Open University of the Airwaves, the College of Knowledge, and especially a welcome to you if you are first time amongst the alumni of this great Open University, and in particular those who are joining us in Los Angeles and Southern California through the medium of KPFK 90.7 FM. Kym Staton is the director of Free the Truth, FreeAssange. His film, TheTrustFall, has been all over the world in these last weeks, and it was in the UK this week. I'm very glad that Kym has dropped in on the mother of all talk shows on the eve of what may be a most auspicious occasion in the Strand at the High Court in London tomorrow morning. Kym, thanks for joining us. Tell us, first of all, if you will, what the film is and where it's been and what kind of response you're getting to it.
Thanks for having me, George. Well, the TheTrustFall Julian Assange documentary, the main premise or goal of it was to make the first documentary that really focuses on the big why of this situation. There's been many documentaries, at least a dozen or so, that have just followed a series of time, a sequence in time, typical documentary style, and we really wanted to make a film that delves more into the meaning of what has occurred and how we can solve it. The film was released in cinemas 28th of December last year, so it's been out for about 4 months now, and we've shown it all over Australia, New Zealand and the UK. There's been over 300 cinemas involved with screening the film and getting close to 1,400 sessions.
That's pretty impressive. Now, I know the answer to the question why, but you give us, if you will, your take on that big question, why? Why has this more than a decade of persecution of Julian Assange taken place?
Well, because Assange is an innovator, someone that was the first person to challenge the mainstream narrative with this dual invention of WikiLeaks and the website that holds the information. WikiLeaks being an innovation that uses encryption to protect whistleblowers, to speed up the dissemination of truth out into the world. And then the website that goes along with it is equally as ingenious, being an electronic digital library of Alexandria that stores all of these documents, 10 million documents in that library, and protects it from being hacked. And so if the website is routinely attacked, as it is, it just pops up again. There's multiple copies of all the documents and multiple servers, and they can't bring it down. And so you have this very powerful combination of these two brilliant ideas. And why have the US gone after Julian Assange? Because of what he can do, his power, his intelligence and genius, and his ability to challenge that narrative, and also as a scapegoating, as a warning to other would-be future whistleblowers.
Hillary Clinton asked, why can't we just nuke this guy? Mike Pompeo, when head of the CIA, had elaborate plans to shoot Julian outside Harrods in London. What could possibly have gone wrong? They decided instead to pursue the lawfare route, and that comes to perhaps an end tomorrow. The US government was asked by the High Court in London to give assurances, failing which they would be minded to grant him the right of appeal. They have failed to grant these assurances. So it seems, to me at least, axiomatic that the High Court tomorrow will grant Julian further leave to appeal, with a very high chance, in the words of the current High Court panel, of success. Therefore, it seems to me they're running out of lawfare time. Do you think that they might, in Washington, with all the problems Joe Biden has already, about November, be regretting this relentless pursuit of this truth teller, this whistleblower, this great journalist, great publisher? And are they maybe looking for ways to get out?
Well, yes, the High Court hearing is actually in 8 days' time, the 20th of May, and I really urge anyone that's in London. Oh, I beg your pardon. I thought it was
tomorrow. Sorry.
So it's 20th of May. Really urge everyone that can reach that location to attend the hearing outside the court and raise your voices and join that protest. In regards to the situation, well, the US was asked to provide assurances on 3 grounds around whether Julian would be possibly subject to the death sentence when he arrives in the US. The second and third were based around prejudice and the use of whether he would have access to the First Amendment protections of free speech, whether he would be prejudiced against as an Australian citizen being tried in the US. The US did provide some kind of assurances on the free speech assurance. It was basically a non-assurance. They said that he could seek to apply and rely upon the First Amendment, which it's not hard to decipher that as being a non-assurance. And then in relation to the potential death sentence, they tried to claim that wouldn't be on the table. However, let's remember, as you said, George, that this is a country that with the CIA under Mike Pompeo plotted to assassinate Julian, to poison him, or to stage some sort of shootout on the street. So they can't be trusted. And let's also remember that the 18-count bogus indictment that they want to try him for carries a potential 175-year prison sentence, which is a virtual life sentence. So that's tantamount to a death sentence anyway. I think the US has really put themselves into a corner here because maybe they thought that if they put Julian in prison for years and years, more than 5 years now at Belmarsh prison, that everyone would forget about him. But that hasn't occurred. The campaign has grown due to public support and interest. And now they're in this awkward position where we have Joe Biden. It's leading up to the US elections in November. They don't want to have an Australian journalist arrive into America in handcuffs. It's not going to look good for Biden, who claims to support freedom of the press. So it seems to me, and I'm in agreement with you there, that next week on the 20th of May, that most likely they'll allow another appeal, and Assange will unfortunately be kept in solitary confinement in a 6-meter square cell for another 6 months.
That's how I see it. Their assurances aren't worth the paper that they're written on. To tell someone they can seek to take advantage of the First Amendment when they know that the hanging judge in the Virginia circuit will simply refuse the application to rely on the First Amendment is the ultimate non-assurance. I'm grateful to you, Kym, and not just for pointing out the error. Do not turn up for a protest tomorrow outside the High Court. It is the following week, and I'm very glad that you set me right on that. Lastly, Kym, how can people see the film?
Yes, thanks, George. They can go to TheTrustFall.org. Look that up on the net. There's a page where you can search your nearest cinema to find a place to see the film. It's in cinemas in Australia, New Zealand, and the UK. We'll soon be bringing it to the US, Canada, and Europe, and all of the rest of the world. We'd love it if people would will check out the film. And for those that are not particularly into politics, this is not really a dry, political, boring film. It's actually a journey of understanding, and audiences are quite transfixed throughout the entire 2-hour film. And it's highly emotive. We often find people leaving the cinema in tears because this is such a sad, tragic, and awful story.
And brilliantly told by you in your film, if I may say so. Kym, a special thanks, because it's in the middle of the night where you are now. I'm very glad that you got up and looked so spruce at this time of the morning for you. Thanks for joining us. That is Kym Staton, the film director who made TheTrustFall. Please watch it, check it out. Who is the greatest danger to world peace? This is a very interesting poll. First of all, because it's the largest poll we have ever had. 79,408 people have voted, and you've still got more than half an hour to vote. So it's by far and away the biggest poll we've ever had. But because it is abundantly clear that the deep state and its foolish dogs have tried to rig the poll, but only on X. Let's take a look. 2% on Telegram thought Putin was the greatest danger to world peace. 5% on the YouTube community poll thought so. 2% on the YouTube stream thought Putin was the main danger to world peace. But 42% on Twitter thought Putin was the greatest danger to world peace. Now, only someone in Ward 5 in Broadmoor could genuinely think that Putin is a bigger danger to world peace than Joe Biden and Benjamin Netanyahu. Someone in Ward 5 in Broadmoor, or someone in the bowels of the British deep state. You know, the kind who use the pissoirs of the Rupert Murdoch press in order to disseminate their intensive research. Let me say, Jack Klugman, great name, says we across the pond don't watch nor understand Eurovision. Seems cheesy as F. Jack, you have no idea how cheesy and how lucky you are that you don't have to be subjected to the hype which annually surrounds this circus, showcasing Western civilization at its highest. Now, you may think it's because you're not in Europe, but Israel isn't in Europe either. But it sure as hell is in Eurovision. Australia isn't in Eurovision, but it's surely as hell in the circus. But then all the clowns are there in that circus. Chris Gosling says, R.I.P. Gonzalo Lira, something I never thought would happen. Even worse is no one is doing anything about it. A very, very sad and disappointing world in which we now live. And my view, 1875, says at 54, am I safe from conscription in the UK? No! Do a runner! I don't know to where, because they might all be bringing in conscription. But the good news is this. If World War III breaks out, you won't have time to entrain to Kupiansk to join the fight, because everything will be over in an instant. Now, let me take a quick break, and then it's me and Gayatri live together in the studio, as well as calls from Archie in Canada, David in France, and many, many others. Stay tuned.
George, I'm just looking at another dimension in this Gaza war conflict. Could this be a religious conflict in the guise of it's not Islam versus Christianity versus Judaism, but an ideology, a Zionist ideology, in establishing their leader that is supposed to come in the future, and they will then govern and rule?
It's in their ideology, for sure. The Zionists are no more and no less than a nationalist ideology. They are nothing whatsoever to do with religion. Anybody who thinks Netanyahu is religious hasn't looked too closely into his private life. These people are extreme nationalists, exceptionalists. Some Americans believe in American exceptionalism. Zionists believe in Jewish exceptionalism. Nobody, in truth, is exceptional. There's nothing religious about it. It's about land. It's about nationalist supremacy, ethno-religious supremacy on the land of Palestine. And the Europeans colonized Palestine in the same way that the Europeans colonized South Africa. So fitting. The victims of white European colonialism are coming to the aid of other victims of white European colonialism. And they're doing the whole world a signal service.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
We're only 60 votes away from a staggering 80,000 votes cast in our poll this evening. Who is the greatest danger to world peace? Biden, Netanyahu, or Putin? You can have your say right up. You've got another 20 minutes. This will definitely go over 80,000 if I'm any judge. Let's go to line one. Archie in Canada on the Olympics. Go ahead, Archie.
Good afternoon and good day, George. First, I'd like to extend a big thank you to your staff for making the effort to call me back. I really appreciate it and respect that.
Welcome.
So your opening comments included your thoughts about Eurovision and the spectacle that it is, and a recent person commented as well just a few minutes ago. I happen to be from a Greek family. I understand the purpose of the Olympics, laying down of arms for nations to get together and have athletes, independent athletes, to compete. Yet it just seems it's gone too far. And I realize it's way too late, but in principle, if the Global South were to hold its own Olympics and boycott Paris, and I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about, like, how far does this go to where Western nations just shut down anyone who has a different viewpoint than theirs, and have the Global South just do their own thing and celebrate the Olympics in their own way?
I'd be much more likely, Archie, to watch a Global South Olympics than I ever would the Western-dominated Olympics, which are being held under the little Emperor Emmanuel Macron this year. He has already ruthlessly deployed the state intervention in what ought to be purely sporting affairs and has banned anybody and everybody that Macron doesn't like from the games. So from my point of view, if there's no Russia at the games, then I won't be watching the games. And if I'm in France, as I often am, I'll be protesting outside the games. I am against nationalism in sport. I don't really like international football for that reason. Much prefer the Champions League to the Euros. I much prefer the Copa de America to the other competitions. I want to see clubs playing football. I'm really, frankly, only really interested in the fortunes of Celtic and Manchester United. I would rather Manchester United won the FA Cup in a couple of weeks' time than I would England to win the Euros or win the World Cup. I'm left cold, in other words, by nationalism. I'm left cold by national flags. I would prefer if athletes competed as athletes. Of course, we'll know where they came from, and they'll have a backstory, but they don't need to compete as a national team. So if your Global South Olympics ever gets off the ground, Archie, I'd say the best thing they could do is take the states out of those Olympic Games. Thanks for the call. David is in France, but on America. Go ahead, David.
Hello, George.
Yeah.
You've mentioned Jill Stein a few times in some of the programs that I've watched, but I've never seen you.
Yeah, she's a good friend of mine.
Okay.
I have interviewed her. I have interviewed her, but not on MOATS. I've interviewed her on another television program that Gayatri and I used to present. She's a very good friend of ours. I'm going to try and interview her before November. Not sure if she'll have the time to do it, but if I can, I'll have her on. Go on, David.
Well, I was just going to wonder what you thought that you could do to help her in her presidential campaign, because between Trump and Biden, I mean, as far as the Palestinians are concerned, there's going to be no difference. And the only hope for them and for the rest of the world is for somebody else to become president, such as Jill Stein. And I just wondered what you thought her chances were achieving that were.
Well, her chances are not high of achieving it. I'd be lying if I suggested otherwise. But the better she does, the closer we'll be to the breaking of a mold which has produced two monstrosities as the duopoly, that one of whom will win the presidency. Either Joe Biden or Donald Trump will be the next president of the United States. And if you think that the mold that produced that choice is a healthy one, then I feel sorry for you. So Dr. Jill Stein should be on every ballot, and every person of good conscience should vote for her. And then we'll know how many people of good conscience there are in the United States. And that will be a big step forward. Dr. Jill is touring the country, being arrested, being assaulted as a Jewish doctor running for president of the United States, which tells you everything you need to know, really, about the level of hypocrisy in this whole affair and the height that democracy in the United States currently stands at. David, thank you for that call. Patty HK says, Lara was the most articulate speaker I have ever heard. I've learned a great deal from her. Thank you for having her as a guest. The question is, Patty, did you mean Rania, who's a highly articulate woman guest this evening, or did you mean Lara, the highly articulate woman guest we had on Wednesday? I think both of them would be in the running for that accolade. Mercury Stars says, thanks, Rochdale, for helping the whole of UK politics by voting for George. Thank you. And of course, endless thanks to the people of Rochdale. Robbie Burns says, Putin clearly isn't the greatest danger. I'm guessing Elon has the trolls in full gear. Well, you may say that. I couldn't possibly comment because I'll be meeting him in the chambers of the High Court in Dublin for a mediation session very soon. So forgive me. I'll not throw rocks at him until after that. Monkey Boy says, take Braverman's photo down, please. My dog won't stop barking at it. I didn't see her picture, perhaps fortuitously. But I have to say, she's definitely not as nice as she looks. Colin, 6-hitter, says the ICJ is a waste of time. Another toothless talking shop. Well, it's beginning to look that way. And if they don't ship up very quickly, that's what everyone in the world is going to conclude. Mohammed is in England, in Sheffield, on the UK media. Ha ha! A man after my own heart. Go ahead, Mohammed.
Hi. First, I'd like to congratulate you on your success.
Thank you, sir.
I make it a quick. What it is, I just wanted to, now you are an MP, you're in the Parliament. Is there any chance, like, how can I say, like people reporting, like BBC, CNN, and Sky, they just report what they like, and we all know is a lie. Right? The consequence is a lie.
We've lost Mohammed, but let me take the opportunity to pick up what I think was his essential line. That why am I not more often on what he thinks of as the mainstream media? There are some key metrics that very few people have yet fully grasped. This show attracts an audience exponentially higher than any so-called mainstream media television show of its type. I mean, like multiples, more multiples than I could calculate. Higher. The written press, behind paywalls, which nobody buys. If you've ever recently been in a supermarket and seen the unsold copies, you already know nobody buys newspapers. And nobody much is prepared to pay a paywall to read stuff that they know intrinsically, instinctively. They know that they're being lied to, that it's propaganda, that the owner is not even in the business of actually selling. He's in the declining business of influencing opinion in the country for his, maybe not often her, political point of view. So, first of all, why would I want to be appearing on television channels whose audience is minuscule, except when I'm on it? You think I'm boasting? Take a look at the metrics. Take a look. When I'm on, when I'm not on, you'll see the difference in the audiences. So why should I help them get audiences? We need to be our own media, and increasingly we are. I make this exception. I feel honor bound to do it. A former friend of mine, Piers Morgan, showed in his latest program, I think it's Uncensored it's called, that he remains, when he wants to be, a master of his craft. I watched, as half the world seems to have done, Baby Reindeer on Netflix. And then I watched the woman on whom Martha was based, a woman called Fiona Harvey. I watched Piers interview her right after I watched the series. Morgan will get a huge audience for that interview, and he deserves it. It was no less than a masterpiece. I commend it to you, both the series and then watch Piers Morgan's interview thereafter. Grant in Florida is up next. Why don't we go to Florida? Who wouldn't? Although it felt like Florida here in Scotland today. Go ahead, Grant.
Hello.
Hi, you're welcome. Go ahead.
Yep. All right, we're going to change that from Grant to The Rock. And I just want to point out something to y'all that people are missing. And it has involvement with France, England, and Germany. What I'm about to tell you, you'll probably already know. The reason why Israel wants the Gaza Strip is because they want to be as powerful as the nations around it. Because right now, Israel have no resources to give or sell to anybody. What is off the Gaza shore? Oil and gas. They want to become a superpower just like the Saudis, just like Dubai, just like Germany. That's what the war is all about. They want that resource, so now they have the power of a bargaining chip. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do, of course, and many people have raised this question, and it's an absolutely legitimate one. If they could steal the oil and gas off the coast of Gaza, as opposed to the oil and gas off the coast of what is recognized as the State of Israel, off its own Mediterranean coast, then of course they would. Their problem is Gaza is illegally occupied territory, and that will never change. It cannot change because the United Nations Security Council would have to change that status. And neither Russia nor China will ever agree to abandoning Gaza and giving it to Israel. Therefore, no oil and gas company could pay Israel for oil and gas in illegally occupied territory. Russia and China would veto any change in the legal status of the territory of Gaza. So you're right to highlight it, Grant. If they could steal it, they would. They may steal it and divert it and claim that it actually came ashore at Ashkelon rather than in the port of Gaza. Any of these things are possible. But the oil companies, the gas companies, would be acting illegally were they to give Israel money for oil and gas off the shelf of Gaza. Now, this is an emergency. I need to read it to you. There is an email address fraud going on pretending to be me and parliamentary secretaries of mine scamming money out of people for the campaign. Orla in Northern Ireland has emailed us details, but she thinks we should put this message out as they are targeting the MOATS audience. You will never receive an email from me asking you for money. The only way you can give me money for this media operation that we are trying to run is via the YouTube donation. I forget what they're called now, but you can, and many have, donated directly to this show on YouTube, or, and infinitely preferably, on my patreon.com/George Galloway. I will never ask you for money on Telegram. You will never receive an email from me asking you for money, and we'll report this to the police. Super chat donations, that's what they are. And MOATS.tv donations. That's the only three ways that you can help this show. Either through super chat donations on YouTube, by means of my Patreon page, patreon.com/George Galloway, or MOATS.tv, click donations. So thanks for that, Orla. I really appreciate that. My own daughter glories in the name Orla, meaning Irish golden princess. 82,202 people have now voted in this poll. Very much larger than the previous largest, which was, I think, around 50,000. Let's go to Scotland, to Glasgow, where a legend, Sarkar, awaits on Rafah. Sarkar, go ahead.
George, thank you so much for taking my call. Small word of compliment. I'm confused whether to like your show more or your questions in the parliament, which you ask. Every politician whom you ask the questions seems like a weasel. But George, a very serious question. I call as a very disgusted, sad person. I'll tell you why. Americans have clearly told the Israelis that we are not sending you weapons. At least that's what the press says. We are not sending you weapons so that you can go and bomb Gaza. Good. Thank you. You should have done this much earlier. But what has been happening? This has not been happening for the past few days. It's been happening for the past few weeks, months, possibly years. Supposedly, the Israelis drop leaflets and say, oh, we are bombing this place. You go from point A to point B. Okay. The next day, they drop leaflets at point B. Or you go to point C. The next day, C, D to Z. What kind of a joke this is? Now, George, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I've been adding 2 + 2, and I can clearly see what will happen. This is not a warfare with guns and bullets. This is a psychological warfare. They'll irritate them so much, the Palestinians, when they're traveling. One of them will throw a brick, they'll make it a terrorist attack, and shoot 50, 60 odd of them. George, if somebody from today or for the past few months tells me that these agreements like Minsk agreements, Oslo Accords, the CampDavidAccords, these were brought for peace, I would tell them, buddy, these are just signatures, autographs, put them in a museum. These count for nothing. I'd like to hear your views, George. How long will this propaganda work?
Well, I'm sorry to say my view concurs with yours, Sarkar, on this as on many other things. It is a psychological terror war, as well as a massively physically destructive war. Those that they don't murder, they wish to drive out. This is a conflict about stealing the territory of Gaza, but even more importantly than that, for they have territory. There are not that many people who want to go and live in Israel. Most of the best people in Israel have already left. Their country is not full. The problem they have is they're forced to apply an apartheid system because they have too many Palestinians in their midst. And if they could get rid of the Palestinians and acquire the land of Gaza, everything in their garden, they think, would be rosy. It would be the final achievement of that which they tried and failed to do in 1948 in the Nakba. They did drive out 800,000 Palestinians who've become more than 12 million around the world now. Today, many of them near you, certainly near me, and I'm sure near you, Sarkar, in Glasgow also. The reality is, as they themselves recognized at the time, having failed to drive out all of the Palestinians from the land, they were left with a ticking time bomb of those who would never accept, as you and I would never accept, someone else stealing their house and land. I put it to my children today, who were questioning me closely on this matter. If someone came and stole our house and kicked us into a tent at the bottom of our own garden, whilst proceeding to enjoy the fruits, literally, of living in our house, would we ever accept it? Would Mummy and Daddy accept it? Would our children accept it? Would their children accept it? Of course they would not. The Palestinians are not lesser human beings than us, with different feelings than us. A thief is a thief, however long they manage to hold on to their stolen goods, their stolen property. They'll always be thieves. And those from whom they stole everything, including the very essence of their lives, their attachment to their own land, their own country, will never forget it. And neither will any faithful children, grandchildren of theirs. If that's not obvious to everybody, then I don't know what to say anymore. Now, if you thought I was seeming more chipper this very evening, it's because I'm sitting next to my own good wife. Gayatri, what's rattling?
We had a call earlier from Mohammed in Sheffield asking about the UK press and media. I just wanted to give context to our audience because it's 8:40 p.m. in UK, and if we look on the YouTube channels, the live streams of Sky News, for example, it only has an audience of 3,700. GB News, 1,200, and across the pond with Fox, 1,100. So this is on YouTube Live, just to give you context as to where the audience goes.
It's very good context. And the difference between them and us, is that, I mean, we're already beating the hell out of those numbers, but by the time of the show on Wednesday, our numbers will be in the millions.
Right.
Their numbers will not be any higher than they are currently live right now.
What will be in the millions is their budget.
Yeah, that's a key point, you know. We're doing all this on virtually zero budget. They, on the other hand, have burned £100 million of Rupert Murdoch's money for Talk TV. Anybody ever seen Talk TV? Go ahead.
So let's look at the poll, your record poll thus far.
82,000.
Who is the greatest danger to the world? Robin Hansman says Netanyahu and Biden are like scissors in regards to your poll tonight. Both blades are equally important when it comes to cutting. Very sharp, that?
Very sharp, but I differ. I voted Biden because without Biden, Netanyahu cannot commit the crimes he's committed. Without Biden, Netanyahu would be no danger to world peace at all because the Americans would simply overthrow him and impose a settlement because Netanyahu works for Biden, not the other way around.
And the debate regarding the poll was, well, Biden is just a symptom, isn't it? Because before that it was Obama, and before that it was Bush. Yeah. It is.
They're both a cipher, They're both a cipher. Should have said the US, Israel, or Russia.
There you go. Well, Tim says, according to my UK government and their twins, the Labour and Liberal parties, it's Russia. No, wait. It's China. Wait, it's Iran. Actually, it's Yemen. They are the biggest threat. Trouble is, I cannot remember any of those countries threatening me or my country, whereas the Yankees have been threatening to stop Corbyn being elected here in the UK. And as for that Mr. Putin, how dare they try to sell us communist, cheap energy? What we need is good old-fashioned, expensive, but democratic energy from our friends across the pond.
Russia's, of course, not communist.
No.
I wish it was. It once was. But the Soviet Union is more than 30 years dead. It's 35 years dead. It's funny how people are still fixed with that synonym. But you're right. When I see statements go up, 3 o'clock, statement by the Foreign Secretary, statement by the Home Secretary, on China, on Russia, on Iran, on Yemen. It's like playing whack-a-mole. So how you say it? Guacamole. You're hitting the latest, greatest enemy and danger to us.
Right.
And no sooner have you hit it, another one pops up.
It's over there.
It's perfectly
right?
absurd, you know. And too many people still haven't cottoned on to that.
Kafil Shumon says, if only the other two cared for their respective nations, like Putin does, there would be no conflict. And the emphasis here is caring for their respective natives. This is our message, isn't it? This is our main demand. That
if only America
our
had
leaders,
if only we had a Britain.
us.
If only we had a British government that puts Britain first. If only the Americans had an American government that puts America first.
Yeah.
The problem is they're putting everybody else first except their own people.
We met another sad case of a homeless person in Rochdale this weekend. He's not being cared of at all. No. Not looked after, not being met towards. Obviously, becoming homeless is like a circular. How do you call it?
And he had been 20 years in the British military.
That's the point being. But unfortunately, the money has been going to the wars that they sent him to.
They wring out, like a wet rag. They wring out these soldiers, service personnel, and just throw them down. And if they end up in Piccadilly Gardens, hooked on fentanyl, spice, or whatever the latest killer is, they don't give a damn.
No, they rely on charity work. This is from John in Budapest. He says, great show as always. Here's a quote for your audience from a dear friend of yours. The next war in Europe will be between Russia and fascism. Only the Western world will call it fascism democracy.
Yeah, it's a fact, yeah. Who's that by?
It's our Fidel Castro in 1992. Wow. So,
amazing.
Yes, incredible. And then finally here is an email from Jad in Canada. I'm a Palestinian living in Canada and I don't miss any of your weekly shows, and I really appreciate what you are doing to help bring the truth out. You are doing better than the Arab leaders.
The Arab leaders, don't get me started on them. Thank you, Gayatri. See you after the show. Maybe think about what we're going to watch on Netflix now that we've finished Baby Reindeer. Who is the greatest danger to world peace, Biden, Netanyahu, or Putin? 83,450 people have voted. I think the poll is almost closed. Let's give them another 2-3 minutes to cast their vote. Biden, Netanyahu, or Putin. Now, I told you earlier about you already know how well we're doing in charts all over the world with the podcast, but we like to update you when we break into the charts in new countries, Belgium, Sweden, Malaysia, Singapore, and the UAE just this week. You can download the podcast from wherever you normally get your podcasts by scanning the QR code on your screen now. Let's go to Emily in Devon on Palestine. Go ahead, Emily.
Hi, George. You all right?
Great. The better for hearing from you. What would you like to say?
Did you think you would get back into Parliament after your time away? What did you get up to away from being an MP? And what is the UK going to actually do about a ceasefire in Palestine? What else can we do to help if millions of us protesting isn't enough to get heard by the government?
Yes, I knew from the beginning of the campaign that I would be elected in Rochdale. Firstly, because I knew already the character and caliber of the people of Rochdale. I knew how faithful they were to the cause of justice, how faithful they were to the cause of Palestine. There is no people, certainly not even the Arabs, are more faithful to the cause of Palestine than the South Asian people who have made Britain their home, and now 2 generations of whom have been born in this country, but they have never forgotten Palestine. They care more about Palestine than many Arabs care about it. They care about Palestine more than the problems they have back in their own parents' and grandparents' countries. So I knew that between the South Asian population in Rochdale and the thousands of young people in particular, but not only young people, who are not of South Asian stock, but who are nonetheless outraged at what's happening in Gaza, I knew that they would vote for me. And so I never had any doubt that I would be elected there. And I like to think that nobody regrets voting for me on the 29th of February. And this coming week, or 2 weeks actually, culminating in my meeting with the health minister on the 21st, on the subject of returning the non-existent maternity service to the town of Rochdale, making it possible to be born in Rochdale again, that not only will no one who voted for me regret it, but that many who did not vote for me will vote for me at the forthcoming general election. What I did when I was not an MP, this is my 7th parliamentary term, was build up the mother of all talk shows and my other media work. And now I'm doing both. And I think you are beginning to see the fruits of that labour. Last word to you, Emily. Has Emily gone? Sorry, Emily. I hope you didn't die. There she is. Go ahead, Emily.
I think it cut out.
I hope I didn't bore you.
No, it cut out. Did you want my last question?
Yeah, go on.
What is the UK going to actually do about ceasefire in Palestine? What else can we do to help if millions of us protesting isn't enough to get heard by the government?
I don't think the British government is, but that does not lessen our duty to demand that it should. We need to put maximum pressure on our political class, on our media class, by boycott, by divestment, by sanctions, by peaceful encampments in towns like Hackney, for example, outside the town hall, in university campuses all over this country. We have to protest, march, demonstrate, and whenever we get the opportunity, we have to vote. Vote against the genocide parties, who are Conservative, Labour, and the Liberal Democrats. These are the three parties that have the blood of the Palestinian people dripping from their hands. And anyone who does not want to be stained by that blood should stay well away from those three parties at the polling booths. Emily and Devon, thank you for that call. This might be the last caller. We'll see. It's Mohammed in London, in Wembley. Go ahead, Mohammed.
Hi, George. How are you?
I'm good, by the grace of God. Thank you.
Say one thing and then possibly ask you a question as well. The first thing was, I just wanted to say thank you for everything you've done for the Iraq war that you did. I remember it was 97, 98 when I first heard of you. I came across a video of yours. And then after, of course, the Iraq war happened, I was kind of started listening to a lot more of your content at the time. And I'm 43 now. I remember in 2001, around about 2002, it was like 20 years ago. I was much younger. I was at university, and you're trying to find a voice. You're trying to find a way you can argue back and debate with teachers who have 20, 30 years of experience over you, and you don't have the right language to use. You don't know who to kind of listen to or look up to have these debates in class. And I remember being at school, university, and some of the lecturers, they were kind of, on the side of America and the UK invading Iraq. And you need someone to listen to who you can kind of emulate. And I remember coming across some of your content, and it was so eloquent. It was, you were able to I would listen to hours of your stuff. and then go in and debate with my teachers and lecturers at school. And you couldn't be accused of being rude or anti-Semitic or racist because you've always been very careful with the language that you would use. You were always on the right side. You would always say things which were correct but virtuous at the same time. You were never rude to anybody. And it gave, I remember me and my friends kind of sharing your content. This was before smartphones, and just saying, look, this is like a playbook for us. This is a way we won't get into trouble arguing. We won't cause problems with teachers. But it was, I guess I'm saying that I know that especially the Pakistani community in Wembley, where I'm from, we didn't have anyone that we could listen to who understood British politics, but also understood that this was wrong. And it was just, I'd never spoken to you before, never called in, and I want to say thank you so much for always...
Well, I'm knocked out, Mohammed, by that. By the way, I'm speaking in Ealing this week on Thursday evening in Ealing, just down the road from you. Do come and make yourself known, and I'd love to shake your hand and thank you in person. Go ahead, you've got time for a quick question.
My quick question is, I heard, I don't know if this is true or not, I heard that when you had the Senate, when you were in the Senate, you put your feet up on the table and pulled out a cigar in homage to Fidel Castro. Was that correct? I'm a cigar smoker myself, and that was an interesting story.
Well, I didn't put my feet on the table because I didn't put my feet on the table. That would be bad manners, and I never put my feet on anybody's table, even the American Senate. But I did light up a Cuban cigar. So I did break the law twice in celebration of the triumph that day, which is almost 20 years ago. This Friday. This Friday, it's 20 years ago. I don't think that's right. But who am I to contradict my good wife who sat next to me? But I did light a Cuban cigar, and I broke the law, unfortunately. 2 laws. One, the Senate is a no-smoking building, and 2, Cuban cigars are embargoed, banned, forbidden in the United States of America. Fidel was not happy at me doing that, by the way, because he conveyed through the embassy a message to me saying this: you promised me decades ago that you had stopped smoking cigars. We need you more as the person you are than we need you as a customer for Cuban tobacco. I stopped smoking cigars now 9 years ago. It's coming up to a decade. I do chew nicotine gum from morning till night. That's why these 2 hours without being able to chew my nicotine gum are rather taxing for me. But a beautiful call, Mohammed. I hope to get the chance to meet you in Ealing at my public meeting on Thursday. So a big thanks to all of you for watching, and a special thanks to our new listeners in the United States on KPFK across Los Angeles and Southern California. The transmitters cover the city of LA and to the north, east, and south, from Santa Barbara to San Diego. KPFK is on 90.7 FM along the Malibu coast. Did someone try hard to get every magical name in the United States into that paragraph? 99.5 FM in China Lake, 98.7 FM in Isla Vista, and 93.7 FM in Rancho Bernardo, San Diego, and worldwide on the internet. It's been marvelous. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. If so, come back on Wednesday for the mother of all talk shows.